Welcome to the next Women in Business keynote. I'm really excited to have Jill Sutton with us today. Jill was introduced to Missy and I several months back, I believe. Jill works with Bethany and has also worked a little bit with Jess Collins. And so she's a great partner of ours over at Oversight Systems. And right off the bat, I knew that Jill had a story to share and lots of different great takeaways that we could all benefit from, hearing a little bit about her background and then also just her perspective on changing leadership and what that looks like. We intend for this to be an interactive call. Definitely be sure that you've got something to jot some notes down. Jill will be asking us to, think a little bit about some different scenarios that we've been through in our life. I would encourage you to put your video on. We're all at home, so we'd love to see where you are, and I'm sure that Jill would appreciate seeing some faces and not just a bunch of names on a screen. So with all of that said, I'm going to turn things over to Jill. Jill, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity. Yeah, I would love, if you're comfortable, sometimes you have those days and you don't want to be on screen. That's totally fine, but we'd love to see you. And we are going to have some participation, I hope, including some chats, some thought time with you, and then just some Q&A. So thanks for the opportunity today. I'll tell you, I am not an expert, so let me just go ahead and put that aside, but I am very passionate about the topic that we're going to talk about. So you may hear that in my voice, but I would love to hear your feedback. If you ask me, hey, Jill, if you could win the lottery and not have to work full time, to make a living, what would you do? So before, I take a little time to travel first, probably go back to school, but what I would work on after that would be helping women in the workplace. We spend about 90,000 hours. Let me repeat that number. We spend about 90,000 hours of our life at work. So we really want to make it worthwhile, be able to bring ourselves to our role, not have to be a different person at home than we are at work. And I see that changing a lot. I think the new world that we're in has changed that a lot. And so while the world's changing, I think it is time to change leadership as well. And I always say, if you want something done, give it to a busy woman. So that's what we're going to talk about. So before I start, my topic, is there anyone that just has a question, or I don't know how much preview you guys have heard about this presentation, but it really is just how women and how anyone actually can change the workforce. And it's based on something I feel strongly about, which is servant leadership. So before I start, just any questions or anything you want to make sure we cover during this time together? And my understanding is that this is a group of people in the organization who are trying to grow and learn and have come together as kind of a group of high potential people with a select group. Is that right? That was my understanding. Okay. Well, they're a quiet group.
They'll come out of their shells eventually.
Okay. Is anybody ready to turn their videos on or not? Is it just going to be me?
Just me and Bethany, I guess.
All right. Well, y'all look great, so we'll go from there.
And listen, I'm in a quarter zip, so listen, we're all good to go here.
That's right. Okay. Well, I'll get started then. Well, maybe I'll get started. And here we are, changing leadership, but we can't change slides. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty with this for some reason. There we go. Okay, so I thought I'd start with a laugh. How many of you, oh, thank you. And that's Morgana. Thank you. You don't have to talk or anything, but thanks for coming on camera. It's great to see you. So I just thought I would share this cartoon to start. I think it's good to laugh. I love to laugh at work and in my personal life as well. But for a long time, this has been the way I think leadership has taken place in the organization. Just let's just execute. The powerful people make decisions till we achieve failure. And that's not fun or motivational for anybody. And how long does that usually take? Well, by the time we talked about it, we're done. So we really don't want to help that kind of leadership perpetuate. So let's talk about what we can do to be better and different than that. So I want to take a minute to go down memory lane, and I'm going to ask you all to take a few minutes on your own. So let me look at my watch and see where we're at. It's 2:06. So I'm going to give you about a minute and a half. And I want you to think about a leader that you have worked with And if you can't think of someone in the workplace, it might have been on a project and volunteer. It could have been someone you've even seen on TV. But just think about one of the best leaders that you've seen or been around. Think about a couple of things. What do they do? How do they make you feel? And a couple of words that you would use to describe them. And I'm going to ask you, don't put anything in chat yet, but in a minute, I'm going to ask you to put some of that in chat. But go ahead and just jot it down. Take a minute, take a notebook, think about that person, think about what they do, think about how they made you feel or others feel if they weren't your leader, and then think about a couple words to describe them. And Lee Wallace, I may ask you to help me capture some of this in chat, or Bethany, if you don't mind. And I don't know how often you guys use chat, but if you're ready to share, just go ahead and put a hand up, or let me know you're ready. It can be your actual hand, or it can be a hand in the chat to make it more interesting. Oh, and there's more people on too, thanks. And Natalie, I like your background. It is the first day in a while around here in Atlanta that's been sunny, so it's really nice to be out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop us for a second. Would anyone mind sharing what are some of the things? Let's first of all, just if you don't mind, throw up in chat some words that you use. I see some people have already. Business owner, empowered, intelligent, empathetic, driven. What else? Encourages and inspires you to be the best version of yourself. Gives you the space to fail forward. I like that. And the courage to help you put back when you're learning from those mistakes. Those are great. What else? Passionate, collaborative, encouraging. Great words. Does anybody want to share anything besides chat? Say anything about the person they're thinking about. And I would say there might be some people wherever you are in your career that maybe you haven't even experienced somebody yet that you think was a great leader. Artistic director, felt heard and seen, collaborative, communicative, sincere. So let's kind of lead by example.
Morgana, I'm curious a little bit on artistic director. Tell me a little bit more what you mean by that.
He ran a theater that I worked for a long time, so he made all the artistic and business decisions.
Awesome.
So he had that skill set of, that's an unusual skill set too sometimes, maybe technical leader or creative leader. That sometimes that you think of those, especially historically, we think sometimes of leadership as hierarchical. And a lot of these words are, I see some collaborative a couple times, knows how to lead and follow. You guys are just making this easy for me because we're going to talk about servant leadership and you're just putting some of those right words right there, but thank you. I figured you would. Hardworking, knows how to lead, follow, encourage growth. That's a big one, Helping other people grow and develop. And I'm probably, as you were thinking about the best leader, unfortunately, probably some things about a leader you didn't like came to mind too. And probably were some of the opposite of these words. Didn't help you develop, wasn't compassionate, myopic, didn't see the big picture, didn't allow you to be yourself, didn't allow you to grow. So I hope you have had more leaders like what you're putting in the chat than what I described just a minute ago. But sometimes they're far and few between. And there's research that Marcus Buckingham has done saying that 80% of the reason why people leave where they are is because of people that they report to. And the other thing too, now in this new world, leaders aren't just people that have direct reports. Leaders take on lots of different roles, project leading, just leading on an effort, or just leading by role modeling behavior. So there's more to that for sure than just having direct reports. So that's changing a lot too, especially in this hybrid world. Okay, before I go on, is there anything that I've missed that we want to add? Any other descriptions or words that really would capture what you think about the best leaders that you've seen? Okay, let's go. We'll keep those words in mind as we continue talking. Well, now we're having trouble again. There we go. So I've done some research. I love to read about leadership, and there was an article, and it's so funny. I actually ran into a small Harvard Business Review of the work that was done, and then also a big white paper that was done called The Extraordinary Leader. And they talked about leadership competencies, like what's really important. There were 16, I think it was 16 or 19 of these that really get to, when they studied leaders over time, over the last 10 years, what were the key things. And so there's other things in what you mentioned, but a lot of the ones that you shared, makes decisions, communicates, develops others, builds relationships, innovates. What else did I see in that? Develops stretch goals, which develops you. So those were the things that really resonated across all the different leaders that they did interviews with. And they did additional content after 2009 that reinforced the same thing. So I found this to be interesting. And again, to me, leadership is not a list of characteristics, but there's certain things that just seem to come up in the essence of leaders that inspire you and that you would call a best leader. And interestingly enough, though this is critical, this is almost like you don't work without making a salary. That's kind of like the baseline. Technical and professional expertise or proficiency is also one that comes up over and over again, and it's important, but it's almost like that's a basic, and that it's the additional things like what you mentioned in your information in your chat is really what makes the difference. Anything here on this list that you disagree with or that you think might be missing? I think a lot of the ones I'm kind of looking over here at the chat for a minute. I'm seeing some of the same things. Okay. I will move on. So what I believe to be what we need now, and this has been being talked about since 1970 by a man named Robert Greenleaf, who's written books and people have studied him. And there's been kind of a renaissance over the last 10 years of this belief, because there's all different kinds. There's authentic leader and extraordinary leader and, hierarchical leaders. There's all different dominant leaders. There's all different kinds. But what tends to come back, even though this work was done, 50 years ago, is the need to have more servant leaders. And again, when you think about some of those characteristics and attributes that you shared, it was about how the person made you feel. It's about how they focused on you. Didn't have their own agenda. It wasn't about them, but it was about developing the people below them, making sure that they were collaborative, making sure that they helped you be the better version of yourself and learn. And it wasn't at the sake of their own increase in power. So this is a quote from Robert Greenleaf, and I would say he is the father of servant leadership. And like I mentioned, this has been around for a long time. Has anyone ever worked for a company that you have heard them talk about servant leadership or familiar with servant leadership? Curious if you've heard that term before.
I was involved a lot with volunteering with the YMCA, and I know the Y preaches a lot about servant leadership and how important that is. So that's definitely something I've seen them put into practice a lot, which is, I agree, definitely, I feel like produces a lot of very quality leaders that I've respected a lot.
Yeah, would agree. Anybody else heard of that term before? was funny. I ran into a man on a plane one time who was sitting in coach with me, and he told me he owned his own company. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, yeah, I'm heading back to my school. It was Texas Tech. He's like, we're doing a big fundraiser, and I'm getting an award because I helped raise over $1 billion for Texas Tech. And I'm like, whoa, that's very unusual, but you're sitting here and coach with me. Okay, what? And so anyway, long story short, we ended up talking. I don't talk much on planes. We talked about servant leadership. And as soon as I got out of the plane, I whipped out my phone and looked him up. And he was like a billionaire who had started his own data technology company. There was the school of business at Texas Tech was named after him. There was a statue of him on the front. And I was like, and this guy's sitting in coach with me, and we're talking about servant leadership and how important that is to him. And I thought, that's not someone I would have put there, and how he downplayed his power, but what he was looking to do was grow his company, the people in the company, as well as help make it have a purpose in helping other people in the business world understand, what was important. So I thought that was a really great example of servant leadership that I just happened to fall into in a conversation on a plane. So I'll move forward. I will say I looked up companies that actually say that they work with servant leadership. And I hope you haven't had any bad experience with any of these, but some of those are Balfour, the Container Store, Marriott, Nordstrom's, Synovus, 7-Eleven, TDI, and Starbucks, just to name a few, but those are companies. And so I even talked to my husband about investing in companies that espouse servant leadership, because I like where they're thinking. And I think that that's where you see growth and long-term year over year. And there has been some data. I don't have those statistics, but I'm happy to share that if you're interested on how they compare to others in their industry. I had some data, but it was very old. It was from like 2010, so I didn't want to share that. But they were talking about the S&P versus companies that utilize servant leadership as their key way of treating their leaders, and the numbers were pretty staggering. Okay, so let me just be clear, because I think I even asked Bethany this. I'm like, I know the term is an old term, and it actually came from, even though Robert Greenleaf worked for AT&T, it did come from some religious undertones, as well as it had some charity and community aspects to it as well. But I just want to kind of talk through what really is servant leadership and what it's not. So I just want to be clear, because I know, especially as women in the workplace, it's not about being subservient. It is really you having the confidence to have people around you that you think are smart and that you want to build them up, because they are going to help. You're cheering for them to be better than maybe even you and the rest of the team. You're trying to develop them to be the future of the company. So it's a being of service to others. And again, that's a hard thing to do, because we're all working, I doubt, for our fun, but it's a much more enjoyable workspace when each person is working towards developing and making each person around them better, especially if the leadership role models that. It's also not a list of competencies. Like I showed you, a lot of those competencies fit within servant leadership, but it's not like, oh, if I do all these things, I'll be a servant leader. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. It really allows you to pick a list of those combination of strengths. Like, look at those characteristics, but maybe figure out the ones for you that you already do well, that you can exponentially improve, and that would make you feel like you're working towards being a servant leader. So it's not just checking off a list, it's really thinking through, what are the important ones? What are those competencies from leadership? Another paper that I read, and we'll talk about this a little bit more towards the end, said that you'll be in the 80th percentile of a great leader if you are rated exceptional on 5 of those competencies I showed you earlier. So it's not about, and it didn't say which ones. They're all equally as important. And some companies, some are more important than others, and that's figuring that out. But great leaders have strong scores on 5 or more, and you can pick those. So it's not about checking the list. It's figuring out which of the competencies, what are the leadership skills you want to grow, and do they support others? So let me say this. To me, servant leadership is not an end state. You're never going to get there. Because there's always times as a leader where you feel like, oh, I just got to take care of something, or I'm catching my ego right here. I didn't get talked about at the meeting and I was involved in that. So I just want people to understand that you're never going to be the perfect servant leader. It's almost like parenting, right? You're striving to get better at it, and to every day, how today can I be a good servant leader? It's not the only way. Like I mentioned, there's all different kinds of leadership, but I think this one keeps coming back because in the world now of COVID, one person knowing everything is never going to be the answer. You have to utilize the skills, the passion, the knowledge, the drive of people around you. And one of the best ways to do that is through the servant leadership model. So I think it's more of a philosophy. It's how I want to lead, and the competencies I build around that is still going to be around the philosophy of being a sort of service to the people that you work with, whether they report to you, they're on a project with you, or there's someone that maybe you're mentoring. And then it's not about the leader. Like, it's not the goal is not to be, I'm a servant leader. I'm the best leader ever because I serve. It's not about you. It really is about the people that you lead and how you lead them. So I'm going to stop for a second. Is there any questions about servant leadership? And there are some, I just read a brand new study on it last night that came out about 2 years ago. They've done a lot of efficacy around it to check and see if those are the skills that do drive success in organizations, and if there's anything of those that don't. And it seems to be still a very strong belief, even 50 years later, even more so in this world we live, where everything has changed and no one can know everything anymore. And if you do know it, you won't know it tomorrow. So I'm gonna stop there. Any questions? Okay. So again, let's take a quick look at these leadership competencies. And I just took out the ones that seem to be driving towards things that don't 100% support servant leadership, though they could. But when you look at all of them, the majority of them were really strong ones that support kind of the key attributes of servant leadership. And again, these are the competencies that are considered, they're considered exceptional for leaders. And so a lot of these really tie into servant leadership as well. And I'm happy to share this deck with you afterwards. So you'll have all this if you're interested about these. Any questions about these? Why I think these are supportive, really strong of the servant leadership philosophy? Again, it's almost like whittled down to a lot of the comments that you made in the chat when we were first talking. The collaboration, inspiring, motivating. Learning agility is a strong one. That one to me, it's about self-awareness and how you people agilities and all the things around how you're staying flexible. I think a servant leader is constantly having to learn about their people, learn about what's going on. It's even more than learning about work. It's kind of knowing also what's going on at people's personal life. Like, as much as they want to share, how can you support their change in their environment at home? How can you support their mental issues that could be happening, mental stress or things that are happening during COVID? So it kind of is sometimes uncomfortable for people because, and it's only to the level people are comfortable sharing with you, but it's doing more than just having that 9 to 5, we work together and that's it. It really is going across those lines. And if any time that's been more prevalent than now, I can't think of one in my work career. And I think I've probably been working longer than all of y'all on this so far based on how you guys look and how I look. Okay. So again, this is a touchy topic, but I just want to think through it. If you think about, and I can tell you stories of my career, of interesting things, trying to be a leader in organizations and how sometimes I've even said the joke, like, I'm acting like a man and that's why I'm being successful. Like, I think, like I'm decisive and quick tempered and quick witted and I can get things done and make a decision. And I always kind of said, oh, I'm, acting like a guy. So let me just say that is not true. But there are some traditional like stereotypes of how males lead and how females lead. And again, why I say we're going to change leadership is not because we need to change at all. Of course, we always need to develop and grow, right? But don't change the essence of who you are. If you traditionally are very comfortable with being thoughtful and collaborative and nurturing and people-oriented and collaborative, guess what? That's the closest thing to servant leadership. So I just want to say a lot of what we have historically thought were female attributes are now being touted as the attributes that are successful for leaders. And I'll show you some data in a minute that supports that. So let me stop here too, just say, this is a little bit of a controversial slide because There are many males that are thoughtful and nurturing, people-oriented, collaborative. There are many women that are technical experts, in charge, powerful, and decisive. And all of these were things that you'll see, on that list of competencies for a leader. But again, what's the servant leadership model seems to be what people remember about leaders and seems to be what companies are striving towards in the new world we're living in. So here's a model from another article that I read recently about culture, but it was within that article, and I have all the links to these articles in my presentation. So again, I'll share that and you can read it. It's a longer article. It's really more about culture, but it kind of shows you how it flips. The traditional leadership model, now this is again not traditional to males or females, just traditional, was more of a command and control. Leaders at the top, less leaders, then managers, then employees, then customers, and kind of the value stream of like what we push out as a company is that part of it. And so, the leader is separate from that, and the leader is kind of pushing down their knowledge and controlling and trying to at this level. And I'll tell you a really great story. When I was doing a lot of leadership development for a previous company, it was a medical company. We did financial services for hospitals, and we used to take our executive team to meet with different CEOs. And one of the CEOs said he had actually started as he had worked in the basement of the hospital as a security guard and had gone and gotten his master's, worked his way up to the hospital. He was now the CEO. So he really felt like, of all people, he kind of got it. Like he was like, and the Scripps is they're a hospital, and they do support their model for leadership is servant leadership. And so Chris, who was the CEO and still is, was saying, I went to Haiti to help with the doctors when there was the first hurricane. So what was that, 10 years ago? And he said, and I landed at night, and I was in this kind of up on a hill, I guess the Dominican Republic, in a hotel. And I got there, and I looked out the window, kind of looking down at Haiti, and I knew the next morning was going to be tough. And I hadn't seen anything when I landed because we got there late at night. And he said, and when I woke up the next morning, I looked out my window and I looked over and I was like, you know what? This is not as bad as I thought. Maybe they've done a lot with the cleanup. And then he got down, got in the Jeep, got taken down to the area of all the devastation. And it was completely different than what he'd seen way up there on the other side of the island, looking down on everyone. He was like, that was the very first like slap in the face, servant leadership. Like, how often are we as leaders, the higher up we go in the organization, separated from the people, the work they're doing, the value that we're creating, and thinking that our perspective is great. Like, I've got this upper perspective. I'm seeing everything. I understand what's going on. He was like, I saw nothing of what was going on. So it was a metaphor for him that he had shared. So I think that is also why servant leadership is so important, because again, the leader gets further and further from the value stream. And so allowing the people that are closer to it to teach you and to support and develop them so that they're the ones, as they have more access to the client, to the employees, that you're developing them. None of y'all probably remember this commercial, but there was one that said, I'm cleaning my oven while I sleep. And that's what I always think about with servant leadership. Like, you've done your work to develop your people so you can sleep, and they're cleaning the oven while you sleep, so that now you can come and do more of it, so that continues on and everyone's growing everybody else. Okay, I mentioned earlier that there is some data, and again, I don't want to conflate the two between servant leadership and females, but what I am trying to say is that I think, at least for me in my lifetime, I've often tried to change how I led to fit in, instead of leading with what I know are my strengths, which is strong communication, strong intuitiveness, and the ability to empathize and like really relate to people. I've often been one that mediates. I'll say like, well, he's saying this and you're saying this. I think what y'all are saying, is that right? And kind of doing that. And so sometimes I wouldn't share those things. I try to be just really more of decisive and in control. And that didn't seem to work. So let me show you some data that's kind of supports that recently. This has been since the pandemic, some research that's taken place. So they did some research, and it turns out it was the same people that did the article about extraordinary leaders in 2009. They did this research recently, and they checked into, during a crisis, they did 360-degree feedback data. And so they took men and women leaders. They did 360-degree data on the people that work for them. This is between March and June of 2020, so right when the pandemic hit, right at the beginning. And they asked for the scores as far as overall leadership effectiveness ratings. And as you can see, pre-pandemic scores for the men, pre-pandemic scores for the women. In both pre-pandemic, the scores for the women are a little bit higher, as well as pretty substantially higher, from a 55.5 to a 57.2 for the overall rating. Now, where this data, and by the way, in the article it shares, is a little bit flugey, is there's so many less women than there are men, and they couldn't interview as many people that were women, had women leaders. So there's less women in the data than men, but this was the overall score. So I just want to, and this is the Harvard Business Review article that was written by Zinger and Folkman, and they are the people that did that extraordinary leader, that competency list that I shared with you earlier. So I thought that was interesting. More data. So they did the same thing based on direct reports answers to the question about how engaged they felt during the pandemic from March to June of last year. Engagement score by leader gender. Those that had men as their leaders scored a 49.2, which again, 50% is great. Overall for all leaders, 51. Overall for women leaders had direct reports, 55.2. So again, my point of this is not to say, yay, women are better than men, because you're going to find there's outliers. But I think some of the traits that allow you to be successful during a crisis are some of the things that might come naturally, or that we've been indoctrinated into thinking women should do. But now it's not what women should do, it is what leaders should do. Any questions about this?
Interesting. I find it interesting that, you know, and I certainly don't have the research in front of me, but I've read a lot of articles about this, is, you know, we've lost a lot of women in the workforce because of the pandemic, right? In the last 18 months, there's just a mass exodus of women who are just, they have to stay at home with their families because of the, you know, pressures of families and that kind of thing. But I find it very interesting that their effectiveness was rated higher, even though there were a lot of women that were saying, hey, I need to take a step back, right, and be with the kids, take care of the house, whatever.
Yep.
Or, you know, the pressure is just too much to try to have to do both. And so I think it's really interesting that while, you know, the numbers have decreased, the effectiveness scores have just gone up, up, up.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. And again, I don't want to jump to conclusions and say why, right? But sometimes,
well, we're superheroes, so there's that.
There you go, put your cape on. And if the women are doing those sort of things, maybe they are allowing people that work for them to also have the grace and the ability to take care of things. And again, there's a generalization, again, always different people. I think because we've had to always manage both, you know, personal life and work at work, more so sometimes than our counterparts, you're more comfortable with asking somebody, hey, how you doing? How's your kids? How's your family? I heard your cousin's sick. Are you okay? You know, so I think just the idea that you're having that communication and saying, I know what you're going through, or I can empathize, or I'm going through it too, we're in this together, some of those things. And again, when I'm saying all these out loud, ding, 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 I'm saying this is how a servant leader, regardless of the time, would treat the people that they work with. So one more really cool point, which I think this is really brings it all around. So you remember those list of competencies? Believe it or not, they actually rated those as well to see in this 360 survey, how do women compare to men? So here's the data without further ado. Okay, and I'll take a minute. So this is a rating according to the 360-degree reviews. They asked people to rate how their leader was doing from a perspective of all these competencies. And the ones you see with the women scored higher on all of them, but the last two: technical professional expertise, taking risk. And the ones that have the green dot next to them is where the difference is statistically significant of the scores. And I think 13 out of 19 women scored statistically higher during this time on those critical competencies for a leader based on the research. And you can see this is Zinger and Folkman, 2020. They did that same article that I showed you earlier with these competencies in 2009. Surprise, not surprise? Any questions about any of them?
I think looking at the first one, takes initiative. I just think women are so quick to like jump on opportunities, people please, we want to take on those extra responsibilities. So I think that makes a lot of sense actually, what a big difference that is. I think we sometimes feel like we have a lot more to prove. So we'll fill our plate and say yes to a lot of things. And jump at opportunities. So I think that one makes sense when I look at that.
You know what? That's a really great point. And I would also say, and we'll talk about this in a minute, what we want to work on. Maybe taking initiative, though, we figure out how we take initiative without doing everything and doing the things that are the most critical for your team and you and the business versus trying to do everything to everyone. Because as we talked about before, in this world right now, things are, you can't. But taking initiative, and I find that interesting and aligned too with towards the bottom, the drive results that the female leaders in this survey drive results 55% versus 48.
And I think too, back to the whole, pre and post pandemic, I mean, I'd be interested to take this a step further to say, where were women? I think agility is one of the big ones. Mm-hmm. Like, where were we 2 years ago versus where are we now? And then the same with men. Like, what has there been a difference? I think that there has. But I'd be interested kind of what those numbers were.
Another one I love too is the communicates powerfully and prolifically. I love that it's not just communicates, that it really is more about a strong, powerful communication and prolifically, continue to communicate. And those natural ones we talked about too, collaboration, teamwork. I think too, it's interesting to me, these are kind of connect. And again, a lot of these competencies do overlay with each other, like one might support the other, but there's champions change, we're 5 points higher, but for some reason taking risk, we're a little bit lower. Actually, I'm sorry, taking risk, we're still higher on that one. Sorry, it's the technical or professional expertise is the one that's lower for women. There was one other one that we were lower. It's not just one that women were lower. I think maybe I said that wrong. Help me find the other one. Maybe it is just one. Yeah. It's just the takes risk. No, takes risk and technical professional expertise. Yeah. Nope. Takes risk were higher. Okay. So there you go. And the statistical difference is an interesting part too, I think. And I don't know, I can't quote the citings from the readings of what they mean by statistical difference, but it looks like to me, most of these, it's 5 points or higher when they say that. Things you probably already knew about yourself, but I think it's nice to have this research and this data to support it. By the way, I sent this to my boss. He's a man, just FYI. Okay, so I say all those things to say, what about this? What do we need to do? What do we need to ask ourselves? I don't think it's about changing who we are, other than just taking what we're really strong in and making it better, leaning in to who we are and helping to change leadership for the future. Because people talk about the new normal, and I heard a quote the other day called the new better. We don't want to go back to how things were. We brought authenticity to work. We brought flexibility to work. We've brought it's okay that your kid runs behind you with no clothes on sometimes and you're on a call and no one bats an eye anymore. That allows for us to be real and to be real with our people and not feel like you have to put a facade up. So let's continue. Let's don't go back to the old ways and let's do the new better. And I think the information that I shared and what you saw about what women do, how we come across at work is a better way of leading. And you don't have to call it servant leadership. I find that to be something that's interesting because I can really think to myself, who am I serving today? If I get up every day and I think, did I serve someone? Did I serve a purpose? Did I serve even, the organization? It pays my paycheck. Did I help make it better? I feel like I've done something. So that helps me. So I would say to really lean into this. Another person that I don't know if he's ever formally said he supports servant leadership, but he definitely, if you listen to Simon Sinek, who I just love to listen to because it's a great accent too, and he's so smart and so passionate about what he does. But this quote was really perfect. When we focus on our strengths, and lean into the strengths of others, we can make the impossible possible. And I know sometimes in this world right now with work and all that we're doing really feels like some things are impossible, but figuring out your strengths, exponentially making those better, and helping others figure out their strengths, whatever those are, I think that really is the definition of servant leadership. So I'm going to bring you back to this slide again, and I'm going to ask you again to take a minute to think for yourself and think about you and what kind of leader you want to be and who you are. If you could, just kind of rate yourself. Don't go through each of these, but just look and say, what are the 3 that I feel like right now are my strongest competencies? And what are the 3 that I think I might want to work on for the future? And I'm going to give you a minute to do that. It is 2:43, so we'll do that. We'll have a quick discussion. We'll have 10 minutes for Q&A if we have. What are your top 3? And you don't have to put these in chat. This is just for you. What are your top 3 that you're the strongest? And what are the 3 that you want to work on?
Y'all better be prepared to share something, otherwise I'm going to call on you.
Oh, good. Thanks. You can do the hard work for me.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I'm even doing mine.
I give y'all 30 seconds.
I went to the Jeopardy theme, but if I had it, I'd play it.
All right, who's going to kick us off? Give us one thing that you're strongest on, one thing you want to commit to work on.
And that is great. Thank you for saying that, because I was about to say you can't do all 3. You can't do 3 things better, and you can't do so. Don't even think about 6. I want you to take 2 that you're going to work on. One in the add category and one in the want to work on category, because I will tell you, one of the other things I've learned about strong leaders is that you don't always try to fix the things you don't think you're great at, but you really exponentially improve on that you're already good at. And then if there's a gap, you fill that too. So so thank you for saying that. That was Lee, I think, right? Lee Wallace,
yep.
That was you saying that. Thank you. So you're not going to tell us 3. Tell us what you're great at and what you're going to get better at, and then where you think you need to grow. Give us one of each, and that's what I want you to focus on. So you may just take for another second and figure out the most important one, because that's what I want you to commit to for your development.
I can go first.
Okay.
Go for it, Ashley.
The one I feel like I'm best at is building relationships. That's my favorite thing about working in general, is that you get to see so many different kinds of people and learn from people and just get to know them in different ways through challenges you go through. So that's just what I feel like I'm the best at, is building relationships. I could definitely work on taking risks. That's something. I'm a bit of a worry wart, look very hard before jumping and then jump, but that's something I could definitely always work on, is taking a little more risks.
That's great. Can I share one thing on each for you on what you said? I really appreciate you jumping in. Thank you for going first, which was, let's just say you took a risk. Start with a risk.
And I'm sweating, just so you know.
Oh, well, you know what? Good for you. I'm going to give you, yay. Thank you. That's awesome. Way to role model. I'm very impressed.
Thanks.
So building relationships, I'm just saying for that, what a strong one, so critical for everything you do. And how fun is it to get to develop and work to even get better at the thing you love doing? So that's why I always love having a strength too. The taking risk, take some calculated risk, like what you just did just now. Force yourself to do a couple little things that aren't, career changing. And then you get comfortable with it. You get more practice. And so I would also say maybe have a risk accountability partner, someone that kind of knows you and they'll nudge you to go speak up, say something. So
I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I
Who
can
wants to go next?
I can go next.
Bethany?
I think that I'm similar to Ashley, where my strength is collaboration and teamwork. I really value that. And then for me, take risks is also, I equate that to like change, and sometimes change can be a little bit tougher for me. So that's something I can work on.
That's great. And you did it too. You took a risk. And then change. I hate to tell you, Bethany, but the only thing constant is there's change. Like, that's it. This world moving forward, it's going to change so fast. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like 10 years from now from a work perspective and the AI that's taking place. So I'm glad you're working on that one, because the more comfortable you are. And I would say from a female perspective, sometimes we think we can't try anything until we're 100% knowledgeable on it, or we can't do work and just do 80%. Man, do it all the time. So feel free. You don't have to be perfect. Sometimes perfection gets in the way of getting something done, and just don't give yourself the grace you'd give somebody else.
Thank you. That resonates with me. Thanks, Jill.
Maybe I know you too well. No, I'm just kidding. And listen, I don't mean to give advice on all of them, so I won't. But some of these, and these are great to see. And as you're sharing the ones that you're really strong with too, I'm hearing a lot of the ones that you talked about were some of the best leaders that you've seen. Let's do two more.
I can go.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'm really strong with championing change. I love change. Love, I guess, innovation too. Just kind of, I think that's just fun. And then I really want to work on communicating powerfully and prolifically. I think I'm strong in writing, but when it comes to using my actual speaking voice, I'd like to work on that.
Well, I would disagree with you, but great job. And you want to mentor Bethany on being changed, because it sounds like you got it down pat. What do you do? How do you manage change? I'd love to hear, because that's probably not a strength that a lot of people have. I know it's a hard one. What gets you? Why do you love change?
I talk about this with my therapist.
I'll send you a bill later.
Yes, I appreciate it. I think I'm just very comfortable with it. I'm used to it. I think I don't even really notice when it's happening, or I just get excited when it happens. It's new and different.
Mm-hmm. No fear around it? Or the unknown?
I mean, the unknown, yes. But change and knowing that something's going to change, I'm really comfortable with.
So as long as you kind of understand the vision or know what might be happening, you're fine. I'm at A, we're going to get to B. I'm fine with that change as long as I know what B is. Or do you not even need to know what B is? You can just go. I
think it depends. Sometimes I definitely fear not knowing what B is, but sometimes I really lean into the well, we'll see what happens.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I was going to say something. I didn't do this, and I probably should have. Do y'all know on Zoom, you can record yourself, and you can go to presentation mode and record yourself, and it'll do the audio and the video. You can watch it again, and that allows you to practice. If you want to present, or you're ever doing something where you got to communicate, you can see yourself and take some notes, and then maybe write down more, because if you're a prolific writer, like you said you are, you could add that to your Zoom. And you may be doing it in person too. One of these days, we'll all be doing some things in person, we hope. But all right, I think we have time for one more.
I can go. I feel like displaying high integrity and honesty is something that I am good at and value a lot. Something I can work on, though, is I think stretch goals. I like goals that I know I'm going to hit versus ones that are a little more out there, that are more uncertain, or putting a goal that I might not hit with the intention of getting as close as I can. I like to have the certainty that I'll be able to accomplish it versus maybe putting it a little further than I'm comfortable with to push the boundaries.
Yeah. That's the certainty of, I can do that. But still, that's great that you recognize that. So I would say, if any of you out there on this call are great at taking risk, communicating proficiently and effectively, powerfully and proficiently, and champion change, we have one person, or you're good at stretch goals, reach out to the person who said that they're working on that and share with them. I love peer mentorship. I wrote an article a few years ago about women in the workplace. And one of the things I said is, have you ever heard of the Good Old Girl Network? There's not one. So let's create one. So help each other. If you have a strength or if you have something that you think you need to work on, and you see someone who emulates that competency, let them practice their servant leadership by helping you with that. It's funny, I tell my kids all the time, they hate, and probably because I've instilled this in them, but they hate asking for help or, and I said, I just realized this in life as I've gotten older. I feel so good when I help somebody. Like, it makes me feel good. I love to do things for others and I get something from it. So if you're not letting other people help you or develop you, you're not allowing them the gift of that. So servant leadership goes both ways. So in that, I want to end with saying all of you have already, and especially this list I just heard, what it takes to be a leader in today's world. Like I mentioned, to be a servant leader, it's not that list, it's picking out the things that you think drives you towards the philosophy and being a better servant leader. And again, the data shows if you have exceptional ratings on 5 or more of those competencies, that makes for a strong leader. 2 to 5 is in the curve of the bell, and then below 2 strengths on those leadership competencies. So thank you guys for letting me have the time today. I hope you learned a little something. I'm happy to answer any questions or share any data with you that I have.
I have a question that I could ask Jill.
Okay.
Putting you on the spot a little bit.
Uh-oh.
I was about to say, when I wrote it down, when you first joined oversight as the chief people officer, what did you notice were the most important servant leadership practices that you yourself implemented that created the most change?
Oh, wow. That's a lot. Let me think about that for a second. I've been there now almost a year. I came to oversight because of their strong culture, the CEO's feeling. I felt like he was a servant leader when we had conversations. There was a growth trajectory for the company, and he really wanted to maintain the momentum they had from a culture perspective. But the couple of things that I helped implement, and it sounds interesting, but just putting some structure in place. I always feel like you have to have some structure to allow for creativity, and there was no formal policies on PTO, paternity, things like that. So creating that so we could actually share that information and communicate it and make people understand it. That was one of the things. And then this sounds weird too, Bethany, but I noticed that leadership did not like having uncomfortable conversations. So I'm really pushing us to have measured, thoughtful, for the purpose of helping each other and developing each other, conversations that sometimes are not comfortable. And so I've had to push back at the CEO a few times and say, I want to model this behavior. I want to share this with you. Can we talk about it? And he's doing it. And then can we talk about this in a group? So anyway, those are the 2 things I'd say. Put a little bit of structure in place to allow people to have knowledge and communicate, and put some structure to the greatness of and doing engagement surveys and things like that to capture data, make it more structured so we can actually share and make it communicate prolifically. And then also encouraging people to develop and grow and stretch, because I think you can't grow unless you have some of those conversations.
I think that's awesome. Thank you.
Question I have, Jill, and this, it kind of popped up. There was something you mentioned earlier that you said, there was just the question of how do you best support your people? And I was going back to, and I think I told you this, one of my degrees in college was actually in leadership development. So this is, I love this topic, but something that I've struggled with a lot is the servant leadership model always the best way for someone to lead? Like, are there times when someone should be more transactional or transformational, or whatever it might be. So what are your thoughts on, like, is it the best, or is there such thing as the best?
Yeah, I don't think there is the best. Here's why I think, though, servant leadership can allow for the best. Allow you to be the best leader you can be, because it is having that situational leadership within servant leadership. If I want to serve my people and understand what motivates them, what their needs are, I am constantly, so if I want to be a good servant leader, I'm constantly understanding what they need. So if I have one person that needs me to be very tactical with them and tell them they're new or they're uncomfortable in a certain role, I'm going to give them what they need. For somebody else, I'm going to give them something different. So that takes a lot of effort, not to treat everybody the same. I always say with my kids, if one kid needs medicine, I don't give all three kids medicine. You give the one that needs it what they need. So servant leadership for me is putting aside the easier way to lead and how I want to interact with each person and figuring out what they need. So I still think it allows for that situational leadership. And again, I keep a general view of servant leadership. A step back into philosophy is what I'm doing, not my own agenda about my ego, but am I fully trying to serve the best of the people that I work with and the company that I work with. So that's why I think it allows for so much flexibility that I feel like it's just a really strong model. And again, I'm never going to say something is the absolute best, but I think it allows for the most flexibility and for a open mindset and a growth. When you look at the pyramid, if you've got more people, that a larger amount of people in the company that are developing and growing and having autonomy and doing what they do best in their role, you can have the best leaders in the world that are great at what they do, but if they're not growing people below them, the company's not going to at least grow exponentially, for sure.
I love that. Thank you. I believe we've got time for one last question, if anybody has one. All right. Well, Jill, thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon. I know I've got lots of takeaways, and I've got lots of Teams chats that are popping up. They're like, I love Jill. I love the stats. And so definitely appreciate you putting together the presentation. I'm excited for some others to be able to view it once we send out the recording. But just on behalf of everyone at the Select Group, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for being vulnerable and sharing some of the things that you want to work on. So hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
I appreciate it. And if you need anything else from a data perspective, let me know. I know you have the presentation. Feel free to share it. And thank you all. And I'm happy to give my email address too if anyone has any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jill.
Take care.
Thank you,
Jill.
Jill.
Bye-bye.